So, think about what happens when you buy a house. You hire an inspector, right?
Right, yeah. Find all the hidden rot.
Exactly. You want to know if the house is solid or if it's, like, structurally compromised. You look at their report, you see the bad wiring or the leaky pipes, and you know exactly where you stare.
Because you have a clear, objective baseline.
Yeah, but when you look at the corporate world, specifically how companies claim to be green or sustainable, suddenly your inspector's flashlight is casting all these weird shadows. The diagnostic waters are incredibly murky.
Oh, absolutely. It's like you're trying to measure the integrity of structure, but the blueprints keep changing while it's being built.
Right.
And, half the doors are locked. You want to make a decision based on reality, but that reality is just so heavily filtered through marketing departments and legal teams.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of sources for you today, built around a pair of final session university lecture slide decks on sustainability in the business world.
That's a great set of materials to dig into.
It really is. And our mission for you today is very specific. I mean, right off the bat, this isn't a deep dive about, like, cheering for green initiatives.
No, not at all.
And it's not about just sneering at corporate spin either.
Right, because we are looking strictly at the manager's eye view here.
Yeah.
This is really about building a highly practical framework to navigate a space that is, quite frankly, causing massive headaches in boardrooms around the world right now.
Exactly. We want to build you a portable BS detector.
I like that.
Yeah, we want to equip you with this clear, reliable framework so you can instantly tell if a company's sustainability claims are a genuine money-making strategy or just a painful burden they have to bear, or, and this is the big one, a really expensive illusion.
Which is so much of what we see out there.
Totally. So, okay, let's unpack this. To figure out what companies are actually doing, we first have to look at what they are telling us and, why those messages are often so deeply misleading.
Well, we have to start with the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
right? Greenwashing.
Yeah.
And it really helps to view greenwashing not just as, like, bad public relations or corporate vanity. It is a fundamental market failure.
Which is a huge distinction. I mean, think about it from the perspective of an honest business. Like, if you are a firm spending millions of dollars to completely redesign your supply chain.
To use less water, cut emissions, all of that.
Exactly. Your products are probably going to end up costing a little more to make. Now, imagine your competitor just spends, I don't know, 10 grand on a really nice advertisement.
Classic lush green leaves.
Right. Green leaves, a picture of a child on a swing, and some super vague slogan about loving the earth. If the consumer cannot tell the difference between your millions in genuine investment and their 10 grand in marketing,
then the cheat wins. It's that simple.
the cheat wins.
And worse than that, it actively punishes the honest firms. The market signal completely breaks down. Because the whole idea that, green cells relies entirely on consumers rewarding good behavior.
Which they can't do if they're being tricked.
Right. When the European Commission recently screened 150 environmental claims made by companies, they found that over 50% were vague, misleading, or just completely unfounded.
Hey, over 50%.
Yeah. On the regulator's own count, the majority of the market's green claims were greenwashing.
Wow. So if the market signal is just fundamentally broken, how do we fix it? If you dig into the mechanics of these corporate reports, the sources point out there's a specific anatomy to a green claim.
Yeah, there's a structure to it.
Right. There are 3 parts that absolutely must align for a claim to be legitimate. You've got the claim, the evidence, and the scope.
And this is really the first piece of your BS detector right here.
Yeah.
So the claim is the core assertion. For instance, stamping 100% recyclable on a cardboard box.
Okay.
Then the evidence is the hard, verifiable data that backs up that assertion across the product's entire life cycle.
Right. The actual proof.
Exactly. And then the scope, this is the tricky one. The scope is the boundary of what that claim actually covers. Does it apply to the entire company's operations, the whole product?
Yeah.
Or just, the cardboard packaging it came in?
It's like if I was bragging to you about eating a healthy salad.
Which is a great claim to make.
Right. That's the claim. And the empty salad bowl sitting on the table, that's the evidence. But I'm conveniently hiding the fact that my scope includes the 3 chocolate cakes I'm secretly eating under the table.
Exactly.
Like the statement, I ate a salad, is technically true. The evidence is right there. But the restricted scope makes the overall picture just entirely misleading.
It's a perfect illustration of a hidden trade-off. You're basically using a localized positive to mask a much broader negative. And This exact dynamic brings us to the riskiest claim a modern company can possibly make.
Oh, the big one.
Yeah, the one that is currently causing immense legal chaos across the globe. The claim of being carbon neutral.
Right. Which usually a company achieves this by buying carbon offsets, right? They say, hey, we emitted 1,000 tons of carbon, so we paid a company to plant enough trees somewhere else to absorb 1,000 tons of carbon. Boom, neutral.
That's the narrative, yes.
But I have to push back here a little bit. Isn't like some offsetting better than doing absolutely nothing? Why is carbon neutral considered the absolute hardest claim for a company to actually defend?
Because the physical reality of an offset rarely matches the accounting. I mean, planting a sapling that might, burn down in a forest fire 10 years from now does not retroactively unburn the aviation fuel a commercial jet used today.
Oh, that's a really good point.
The emission is immediate and permanent. But the offset is delayed, it's fragile, and it's often nearly impossible to verify long term.
Which perfectly sets up that landmark 2024 ruling in Amsterdam involving the airline KLM.
Yes, the KLM case is huge.
They had this huge campaign called Fly Responsibly, and they offered this CO2 zero option where a customer could pay like a little extra on their ticket to help fund reforestation projects, supposedly offsetting the flight.
But the mechanism of how they were stocked is what makes this case such a turning point. KLM wasn't sued by a government environmental agency.
Right.
They were sued by non-governmental organizations, specifically Fossil Reach and Client Earth. And they didn't use environmental laws. They used consumer protection laws.
That is a massive distinction. I mean, usually you picture environmental lawsuits getting bogged down in these decades-long debates over clean air targets or complex emissions treaties.
Exactly. But by pivoting to consumer protection laws, the NGOs essentially treated as false advertising.
Wow.
Yeah. They argue that if you tell a consumer at the checkout counter that their extra fee cancels out the flight's impact and it objectively doesn't, well, that's misleading the consumer.
And the Amsterdam court agreed.
They did. They ruled that KLM's offset option didn't validly cancel the climate impact. Furthermore, their future environmental targets were deemed too unsubstantiated, and they completely hid their scope.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning they hid their aggressive intent to actually grow the total number of flights they operate.
Oh, so they were definitely doing the salad and chocolate cake routine.
Completely.
They were saying, look at all the nice trees we're planting, while simultaneously planning to pump significantly more carbon into the air.
Exactly.
The sources also highlight something called executional greenwashing. And this is fascinating to me because it involves zero false words.
Right. No text needed.
A company just plasters lush green forests, pristine blue skies, and all this nature imagery all over an inherently polluting product. The picture just does all the lying so the legal text doesn't have to.
And regulators looked at these tactics and realized something critical. If consumers lose trust in the labels, whether it's a carbon neutral badge or just a nice picture of a forest, the incentive for any company to genuinely invest in sustainability just evaporates.
Because trust is the currency of this entire market.
Exactly.
And because these vague claims and clever images were actively destroying that market trust, the regulators didn't just ask nicely for companies to stop. They brought out the heavy artillery.
They really did.
But here's the problem. It's one thing to look at an airline ad and spot the theater. It's entirely different when that massive crackdown creates a bizarre opposite problem. Let's look at that enforcement wave from 2024 to 2026.
Right, things changed very quickly.
Yeah, greenwashing went from being like a minor PR embarrassment to a massive existential legal threat practically overnight.
The regulatory teeth grew incredibly sharp. So
Yeah.
in the United Kingdom, the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, was granted the power to fine companies up to 10% of their global turnover directly for misleading environmental claims.
Okay, wait. 10% of global turnover. Just to put that in perspective for you, that is not a slap on the wrist. That's not just a simple cost of doing business.
No, it's not.
That is a, we are taking your entire company apart kind of fine.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the European Union moved to flat out ban carbon neutral product claims altogether if those claims rely purely on offsetting.
Wow.
And over in the United States, you had states like California starting to pass laws demanding public, verified proof of any net zero targets a company advertises, complete with daily financial penalties if the company fails to provide the receipts.
So we have this global pincer movement from regulators. And it spawned a very predictable corporate reaction, which the sources called green hushing.
Yes, green hushing.
Companies became so terrified of these massive fines or, getting dragged into a huge political firestorm that they deliberately started staying completely silent about their genuine positive green target.
Which is perfectly logical.
I mean, if I'm a CEO and I'm staring down a 10% global turnover fine just for using the wrong adjective on my packaging, why on earth would I say anything at all? Why not just lock the doors and stay completely quiet until my supply chain is absolutely perfect?
It is a completely rational defensive reflex for a corporate board.
Yeah.
If greenwashing is saying more than you do, green hushing is doing more than you say.
Right.
However, from a macroeconomic perspective, this silence is incredibly dangerous.
How so? Does it just remove public accountability?
It definitely destroys accountability, yes, because if a company never publicly states a target, no consumer or NGO can ever hold them to it. But more critically, it hides best practices from the rest of the market.
Oh, I see.
Suppose a company invents a brilliant, highly sustainable manufacturing process, but they keep it a total secret out of fear of a marketing misstep.
Then nobody else learns from it.
Exactly. That innovation doesn't inspire their rivals to improve. They don't gain market share from appreciative consumers. And perhaps most importantly, investors who specifically want to allocate capital to green innovation are just left flying totally blind.
So you're trapped. You can't be too loud or you get fined 10% of your revenue. But you can't be silent either or you lose investment and market edge.
It's a very tight spot.
The sources suggest the solution here is what they call the narrow path. A company has to say exactly what is true, back it up with rigorous evidence, and keep the language completely proportionate.
Proportionate is the key word there.
Right. No grandiose slogans. You say, our packaging is 70% recycled material. You don't say, we're single-handedly saving the earth. It's just numbers, data, and really tight boundaries.
The claim has to precisely match the evidence. Nothing more.
But, the headache for managers doesn't just stop with marketing rules. The actual global rulebook on sustainability reporting, like the massive framework of what data companies actually have to collect and publish, is swinging wildly.
It's a pendulum.
It really is. It makes it nearly impossible for a manager to just follow the law.
Yeah.
So let's impartially map out this massive regulatory shift that occurred around 2025 and 2026 because it created a perfect storm of confusion.
Yeah, it really did. So for about a decade, the global trend was moving heavily towards stricter universal reporting. But recently, we experienced a massive, unprecedented divergence.
Okay.
The European Union, which historically acted as the absolute strictest regulator on the planet, actually simplified and rolled back its rules.
It's just wild to think about.
They passed something called an omnibus directive, which is essentially this legislative tool that bundles a ton of different legal changes into one massive vote, just to streamline the process.
Right.
And through this directive, they cut around 80% of smaller and medium firms out of mandatory sustainability reporting.
80%. That is a staggering rollback. What caused the strictest regulator in the world to suddenly just hit the brakes like that?
The catalyst was a deep fear over global competitiveness, largely crystallized by the Draghi report.
Okay, the Draghi report.
Right. European leaders looked at the landscape and realized their incredibly strict, complex reporting rules were just drowning European firms in paperwork.
That administrative burden.
Exactly. It was making it extremely difficult for them to compete globally, especially against rivals in the United States and China, who just weren't carrying that same regulatory weight. So the EU prioritized economic survival and eased the burden.
And then, across the Atlantic in the United States, there was a major federal retreat, but for completely different reasons.
Yes.
Amidst a pretty significant political backlash against ESG, which, by the way, stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance Criteria that investors use to evaluate a company's risk, federal climate disclosure rules were largely rescinded.
The federal government essentially stepped back from the battlefield.
Right, but that didn't end the regulation. It just shifted it to the states.
Which arguably creates an even more chaotic environment for a business. Because you have states like California stepping into the vacuum. And California is the 5th largest economy in the world.
They have a lot of leverage.
Massive leverage. They can effectively set national policy. Because if a massive corporation wants to sell products to Californians, they have to comply with California's strict state-level climate disclosure laws, regardless of what the federal government says.
So just to recap this multinational nightmare for a second, and again, we are not taking sides on the politics here. We are just looking at the reality for a business.
Right.
You have the EU pulling back out of fear of losing economic ground. You have the U.S. federal government retreating due to political pressure, leaving massive states like California to enforce their own rules. And meanwhile, the United Kingdom is the total outlier, actively continuing to build stricter, more comprehensive reporting standards.
It's a mess. A multinational firm operating across all three regions is facing three completely different, conflicting realities.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. If the rules are being rolled back and the EU and US are easing up their mandates, doesn't the whole corporate sustainability movement just, collapse?
That's the big question.
Is it all just a political football that gets deflated the second the economy gets tough?
To answer that, we really have to pull back and separate the legal rules from the physical reality.
Okay.
Rules are negotiated by politicians, right? When the economic weather gets tough, the rules change. But physics is not negotiated.
The atmosphere does not care about an EU omnibus directive or a US state law.
Exactly. And a prime example of this collision between rules and reality happened at COP30.
COP being the Conference of the Parties, the big UN climate summit.
Right. At the 30th conference, governments formally acknowledged that the world will likely overshoot the crucial 1.5-degree warming target. Global emissions were reported to be 10% higher than when the Paris Agreement was signed.
Wow. 10% higher.
Yeah. The physical reality, which includes extreme weather events, crop failures, and major supply chain disruptions, is escalating regardless of what politicians are doing with their reporting rules.
And that physical reality translates directly into hard business reality. I mean, efficiency doesn't care about regulations either.
No, it doesn't.
If a company overhauls its factory to use 30% less energy, they save money, regardless of who is in office.
Exactly.
If a beverage company secures its supply chain against incoming regional water shortages, their business survives while their competitor literally dries up. Resource costs and investor demands for resilience persist, even if a specific disclosure law is repealed tomorrow.
And because the regulatory rules are a moving target, managers just cannot rely on simple legal compliance to guide their strategy anymore.
Right.
If regulations are just the speed limit signs constantly changing on the highway, managers need to understand the actual engine of the car, and the sources provide a brilliant portable tool for this.
This is the BS detector we promised.
Yes, it's a three-part lens for evaluating any corporate action: value, cost, and theater.
Okay, let's run a company through this engine. So if compliance isn't the anchor and we use this lens, what does value actually look like in the real world?
Value is your genuine win-win. It's something that genuinely helps both the firm's bottom line and the world.
Give me an example.
The classic example highlighted in the sources is Ørsted. They were a dying fossil fuel-heavy coal business, and they completely reinvented themselves into a world-leading renewable wind energy company.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't do it for a PR campaign. They did it because wind was a superior, future-proof business model.
Right.
Another example is Fairphone, which designs modular phones to eliminate electronic waste while carving out a highly loyal consumer niche. That's value.
Right.
We build a durable competitive advantage.
But not everything is a magical win-win, right? Sometimes doing the right thing actually hurts. Which brings us to the second lens, cost.
Right. Cost is a real necessary burden. Someone has to pay for the transition.
Yeah.
Take Tata Steel at Port Talbot in the UK. They transitioned their massive blast furnaces to making greener steel. It was fantastic for the planet and absolutely necessary for long-term climate goals. But the transition resulted in 2,800 jobs lost.
That's brutal.
It is. That is a pure, heavy cost borne by the workers and the local community. Pretending that scenario is a joyful win-win is just intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, you have to acknowledge the pain there. And finally, we have theater. This is the appearance of action, standing in for actual substance.
My favorite.
Right. This is the airline we talked about earlier, buying cheap, unverified tree planting offsets so they can stamp carbon neutral on their ads while simultaneously expanding their carbon-heavy flight routes. It's just the illusion of change.
Exactly. So let's apply this to a real-world scenario. Let's say a firm quietly scraps its internal net zero carbon target the exact week a government reporting rule is eased.
Okay.
And they release a PR statement calling their retreat pragmatism or responding to the simplified landscape. What stands out to you in that?
Well, I mean, I would say that is pure theater.
Right.
Because if the target only existed to tick a government compliance box and they drop it the second that the box is removed, they never had an underlying strategy in the first place.
There you go.
A firm anchored to value would keep tracking their energy data and improving efficiency because using less energy makes them more profitable, even if they no longer have to formally report those metrics to a regulator.
And that is exactly how the manager's eye view works. You look past the shifting laws and evaluate the core motivation.
Now that we have this value-cost theater lens, let's point it at the biggest debate in the entire field of corporate sustainability.
Let's do it.
Because all of these shifting rules, these greenwashing lawsuits, and corporate reactions ultimately boil down to one massive foundational question. Is sustainability fundamentally good business? Does applying this lens actually make a company any money?
The case arguing that it is good business is actually remarkably strong, particularly when you look at risk reduction.
Okay, how so?
Consider what happened to the mining giant Rio Tinto. They legally, but disastrously, blew up the 46,000-year-old Juukan Gorge indigenous rock shelters in Australia.
Just to expand an iron ore mine.
Yes. They followed the letter of the law, but that massive social and governance failure became an incredibly expensive global crisis. Executives were ousted, and their fundamental license to operate was severely threatened.
So ignoring sustainability in that case was terrifically expensive.
Absolutely.
But the case arguing against it is also rooted in some pretty hard, uncomfortable realities, too. Look at BP. Around 2025, they retreated from their ambitious renewable energy transition plans and pivoted heavily back to oil and gas extraction.
They did.
And why? Because the financial markets actively punished their green transition efforts and richly rewarded short-term fossil fuel profits. And we just discussed Tata Steel. Sometimes doing the green thing is just a pure, massive financial and social cost.
It's true. So, is it fundamentally good business? The true, sophisticated answer is, it depends.
Which means we have to just reject the lazy slogans on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely. Sustainability is always a win-win. Is a lazy slogan that completely ignores the real pain of transition.
Right.
But sustainability is a total con is also a lazy slogan that ignores the massive financial value of resource efficiency and supply chain resilience. It depends entirely on the sector and the time frame.
Explain the sector part.
Well, if you are a wind developer, sustainability is your core product. It's pure value. But if you are a commercial airline, your core business relies on jet fuel, which is incredibly hard to green.
Yeah.
Therefore, your efforts skew heavily toward cost or, the dangerous temptation of theater.
And time frame matters immensely, too. What looks like a painful, expensive cost in the short term, like spending millions to overhaul your supply chain today, might be the actual only reason your company survives a massive global resource shock 10 years from now.
Exactly. And this raises an important question whenever you read a corporate announcement. You have to evaluate the trade-offs. You have to ask, who gains and who pays?
Because a strategic move that is brilliant good business for global shareholders might represent a devastating cost for a local workforce.
Right. The goal of using this framework isn't to turn you into a cheerleader for every green initiative, nor is it to make you a reflexive cynic who just dismisses everything.
The goal is to make you an analyst.
Precisely.
And that is exactly the toolkit you now have. You can read between the lines of any corporate green claim. You don't need to memorize the shifting rules of the UK, the EU, or the US because, honestly, those speed limit signs will probably change again tomorrow.
They almost certainly will.
You just need to look at the engine. Ask if a company is prioritizing a loud claim over hard evidence. Ask if they are hiding the scope of their pollution. And most importantly, ask if their actions are genuine value, a necessary cost, or just really expensive theater.
If you apply that lens, all those weird shadows disappear, and you will see the business world much more clearly.
Now, I want to leave you with one final kind of provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, I like these.
So the sources briefly touch on the massive energy footprint required to run artificial intelligence systems when calculating global emissions. Imagine this scenario for a second. What if we were to unleash an incredibly powerful and highly energy-intensive AI to automatically scan, verify, and grade every single product's green claims across the globe using its exact value-cost theater framework?
That would be an amazing tool.
It could instantly expose the hidden scopes and wipe out global greenwashing overnight, but would the massive environmental footprint, like the sheer carbon cost of running those massive data centers to power that AI, actually negate the value of exposing the greenwashing in the first place.
Wow.
At what point does the ultimate tool built to fix the problem become part of the problem itself?
That is the ultimate hidden trade-off.
It really is. It's like we said at the start.
Well,
You hire the inspector to find the hidden rot in the house. But if the inspector has to knock down a load-bearing wall just to see the plumbing, you have to ask if you're actually better off.
exactly.
The diagnostic waters are murky, but hopefully you've now got a compass that works even when the magnetic poles keep shifting. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep asking the hard questions. Goodbye.